On today's show, the Denver Nuggets go into the NBA draft with 3 picks. They take 3 surprising players. We'll break them all down and talk about what their projected role is on the next season and seasons to come. This is Locked On Nuggets.
You are Locked On Nuggets, your daily Denver Nuggets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, everybody, and welcome to the Locked On Nuggets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by the Game Time app. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Last-minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Matt Moore is off today. He's getting a much-deserved vacation. I'm your host, Adam Mades from DNVR, and I'll be breaking down all of the draft stuff today. I'm excited for it, man. I joked about it over at DNVR and even on this show. The Nuggets parade was 1 week ago. Championship game was 11 days ago. The turn from that to the draft is kind of an interesting one. And by the way, I think it was an interesting one for the Denver Nuggets. It's one storyline I think that could become interesting here as we evaluate this draft. This is a first time for a lot of people, including, many of the people in the Denver Nuggets organization, to go from having so many things going on with the finals and then right into the draft. Now, of course, a front office multitasks all year round. Even in years prior, February, March, April, playoffs, this or that, you're thinking, oh my gosh, what's the intensity like? And then you call up a front office and they're like, hey man, this is, we're so busy scouting right now. We're watching the games and stuff, or we're watching them from Europe because we got the draft coming up in a month and this or that. So teams are used to multitasking, but still going through the emotional roller coaster of winning an NBA championship, reaching the highest goal. You have to imagine that textures this process, for people, even for front office members. So, but I want to get into it because my approach with the draft is this. There are people that get into the draft, draft analysts, basketball Twitter people, and it's part of what makes the process fun for them, part of what makes the experience. I'm somebody that likes to know what I'm talking about for sure, or feel very confident in it. And to really feel confident in the draft, you have to just put an amount of time in that I never am willing to commit. I'm covering the NBA. I'm not covering college. I'm not covering Europe. So for me, my draft takes are almost always by nature a little bit couched, a little bit reserved. I like to look at a player and then start to break down, okay, what is their skill set? How can they succeed? And approach it from that angle, less so than just saying, oh, this is a good pick, this is a bad pick, this guy's going to be a bust or whatever. I think it's more interesting. These guys are all so good that you want to look at them and say, okay, these guys have tools. What are the tools? What is the skill set and how can they succeed in the NBA? So that's going to be more or less the approach. Let's get into it. Very first pick, Julian Strawther out of Gonzaga, 6'6". He was taken with the 29th pick, by the way. And on most mocks and on most big boards, he was a guy that was somewhere in the 33 to 45 range. So this was a pick. At the end of the first round, picks start to get a little bit more random anyway. It's not like there's a really set order for every team. But nonetheless, I don't know if I saw any mocks that had Strawther at 29. And that reminds you of Peyton Watson last year, who was taken, nobody really had him at 30. Most people had him 35, somewhere in that range. So Calvin Booth, 2 years in a row, has taken players that were at least mocked a little bit behind where they were taken. And, last year, at least with Christian Brown, really looked great. 6'6", 6'9" wingspan for Julian Strawther. If I had to, everybody likes the simplest way to do this, and sometimes the most confusing, is to give a player who you would comp him to physically, and also a little bit of what kind of player does he remind me when I'm just watching the tape. I would say maybe Kevin Martin from back in the day. Kevin Martin, I think, was 6'7", so a little bit bigger. But part of why I think both of them fit is Julian Strawther might be the best shooter in this entire class. I mean, you could easily make a case that he's the best shooter of anybody in this class. And it's all types of shots: movement, set, catch and shoot, going forward, going backward, going left, going right. He has a great jumper, a really good-looking jumper. And then the reason I like the Kevin Martin comp is Kevin Martin had a little bit of an awkward shot, right? He had kind of in front of his face or this or that. I think Strawther has something similar in that it's really lightning quick. His release, he gets the ball out of his hands insanely fast. so fast that it almost looks like he needs to slow it down. Like usually when you're talking about shooters, you're talking about do they need to speed it up? Now, of course, he doesn't need to slow it down. If you can make shots at the volume he is with as quick of a release, because it almost looks like he's just throwing the ball at the rim. Like it's not, I wouldn't call it it's a very pretty looking jumper, but it's so quick that it just kind of happens. The ball just gets out of his hand. And some of that is, I think he releases the ball, a little bit low. Like that shot almost comes from here, like right in front of his face. So it's a unique jumper a la Kevin Martin, but a la Kevin Martin, it goes in. It's incredibly silky, makes it all the time. And the proof is in the pudding, obviously, just with the numbers. 41% from three last year on 5.5 attempts a game. That's great volume, and that's insane efficiency. And then you think, well, where was he doing this? He was doing this for Gonzaga, and he was doing this against good competition and in a very good program. So Strawther, to me, when we just talk about shooting, the shooting box is fully checked. Not a half check, not a three-quarter check, fully checked. Elite shooter, maybe the best in the draft. And then, like I said, the movement part of this, most great shooters have this trait, but not all. And he has it in spades that he really seems to know how to get his shot off when he's off ball, how to move to get open. And so he has that off-ball game that I think, and coming from a Gonzaga system, he's going to have a good basketball IQ and a good basketball foundation for off-ball movement. I talk about Michael Porter this way a lot, that he is a wide receiver, not a running back, meaning he doesn't necessarily get a lot of looks with the ball in his hand to create openings, this or that. I think he's going to try this summer, especially to really add it to his game. But he can be a great route runner. Strawther, I think, is an even better route runner. He's not as tall, obviously, so he doesn't, Michael Porter, it's easier to get a shot off. It's even easier to get open just because of how big he is. But Strawther just, I think, has a great ability to just move around the basket. Oh, they're driving this way. I got to slide my feet into the open shooting pocket and get here. And then even sets guys up. He's really, really good at the fake right, go left off of weak side action. So if you're in help side, the ball's over here. Let's say there's a pick and roll running over here. Jamal Murray, Jokic pick and roll, and I'm the furthest man away, so I'm in help. You're keeping your head on a swivel, right? Left, right. Well, he does a good job of, moving one direction. So a guy kind of sees in the corner of his eye, goes, okay, my guy's moving this way, and then breaking to the other direction. So when the guy's head goes on a swivel, he thinks that his defender's over here, and now he's moved to the corner into an open shooting pocket or even to a cut. Strawther is really, really good at this, at moving off ball into getting into open pockets and for punishing help side defenders, putting them in a pickle. And that's part of gravity. Part of gravity off ball is, are you making the help side defense think? And I just think he's a really good player like that. So when you think about offensively, how would he in theory fit with a Nikola Jokic? Perfectly. Jokic would love playing with this guy because he's going to have open shots nonstop for him. He just knows spacing and he's going to knock him down. And then you have to have a counterbalance to that. And he has some. Number one, he's very good at attacking closeouts. Because his shot is so quick, you have to close out extra hard on him. So can you punish it? He doesn't have a lot of wiggle or shake to his game, but he does have quick decisiveness. So if he can read exactly, you're coming hard, he's going to have one dribble, get into the paint, or two dribbles, and then he has an elite floater. He might have the best floater in the game. So best shooter, best floater, you could make a case for that. Absolutely elite. The numbers on it were insane this year about how frequently he got to his floater. I think he got to his floater more than he got to the rim. We'll talk about that in a second. But he was very comfortable taking the floater, and he was very good at generating floater opportunities. You get to the intangibles, he's a winner. He played for Gonzaga and, had a very good 3-year career there. He came up behind Jalen Suggs. He came up behind Corey Kispert. So he had guys in front of him who were good players, and he went through the ranks. And I like that. This is old school college basketball. When you talk about a guy who, they didn't just come in one and done and like, okay, you're out of there. Not that there's necessarily a problem with that, but one of the keys or one of the things from this draft is that all the players that are coming in are experienced college basketball players. Calvin Booth is a former player. So his perspective on basketball is going to be different from, say, a Tim Conley. Not better or worse, but that it's going to be coming from a position of, hey, I played for a team, and championship caliber teams, the Denver Nuggets, reigning NBA champs, what's needed? They need experience. You need guys that are going to be mature and have a foundation, because very likely a lot of the guys that were taken, if not all of them, are going to be guys that are pipeline guys, meaning next year, and I'll talk about this in a second. Next year, how much do they play? We'll find out. Probably not that much. But down the line, they need to be ready. And you can't spend a year teaching these guys fundamentals like, okay, here's how you move off ball, and this is how you run Chicago action and zoom action and all these different things. And guys have to spend a whole year just learning that. No, Julian Strawther comes in with a baseline of understanding how to run an NBA offense because he comes from a great program in Gonzaga that already does intricate and high-level read and react stuff that he's going to have a great baseline there. Now, the negatives. His defense is not good. And I'm actually kind of surprised by the pick in this one way. Last year, the Nuggets went with two great defensive players who the question mark was offense, and it made sense. Denver's offense is already good. Do we need more offense? Probably not. So you just need guys that can defend at a high level. This year's almost flipped, with the exception of Jalen Pickett, but almost flipped in Strawther being the first pick. He is a guy that I think is ready to play offense at an NBA level. I don't know about championship level because I do think that as you go into the playoffs, teams are going to look at it and say, okay, he can't get to the rim, so we have to attack him and close out hard, but also bring help early and see if he can make passes, see if he can get around and try to finish at the rim. He probably can't, but who knows? Maybe he can even be a player that's like a role player off the bench in a playoff next year on offense. But on defense, I'd be really surprised if he could play at that level, even close to that level. I think he has a long way to go, and I don't know if he has the physical tools to be that. So that's the part of him where I'm very bullish on his offense. I'm very bearish on his defense, and I'm curious to see how that translates at the next level. If he's able to just keep guys in front of him, he's a little bit slender framed. So, you think about, he's probably a shooting guard, a straight up shooting guard. Playing him at small forward, okay, he's going to be undersized. Maybe physically there's going to be some twos that are just too big for him. Your elite players, your James Hardens, those guys are going to be way too big for him. So even in a playoffs, if you have a big size guard, they're going to find him every single time, and he might be hopeless. You're compromised in that way. He does have length, so team defense wise, maybe you can get away from it. But defensively, I just look at him and think, what's his upside? I think it's a little bit lower. As we get into the tape, maybe I'll see some more there that says, okay, there's something here. But right now I look at him and I think offense, extremely enticing, defense, extremely concerning. And then if you project forward, I think that you say, okay, what's his role next year? Likely outside of the top 9, in my opinion. We'll see how that shakes out with Bruce Brown. We'll see how guys like Peyton Watson, how do they develop? But I think that if you're trying to have a title defense, he at least starts the season outside of your top 9, so it means he's probably outside of the rotation. That doesn't mean that next year he won't step on the court. It's just that he's likely to be, I would expect him to play fewer minutes, depending on how the roster shakes out, fewer minutes than Christian Brown. And so that means that he's really just filling in when guys get hurt. Long term, what does he project to be? This is what's interesting. And this is another hallmark of Calvin Booth. If you look at last year, I would have said Christian Brown projects to be a role player off the bench. And at his best, he can fill in as the defensive stopper in a starting lineup, which I think is true. I think Christian Brown is a starting caliber prospect. He can start, but he's likely your 5th option on offense, which is a great role. It's that's an important role. You look at Strawther, and I would say I think I'm less bullish on him as a starter at any point. I think he is a solid backup player, and that's more likely what he is going to grow into being, is a utility shooter off of the bench. And again, you need players like that. With where Denver was picking, if you can get a guy like Strawther on your roster for 4 years, as a rookie, 1 year maybe he plays very sparingly. Next year maybe he's in your top 9 off of the bench, but 50-50 on whether he plays in the playoffs or not. And then you get 2 years where he's just a solid bench guy who can play in the playoffs and compete at your roster. Great pick at 29. So this is not a knock on him, but setting expectation for Strawther, to me, I just don't see it. Maybe I'm wrong about this. I mean, like I said, it's the draft. I think that he's much more of a solid role player. We know what we're getting. He can make shots. Let's see if his defense and his body can improve to get to that level. But I like it. Putting a grade on the pick seems a little strange. I like the pick. I'm intrigued by it. But I do have some questions about his defense, and I think Denver's developmental pipeline and aptitude is going to be tested by, hey, let's see how much we can grow this guy into exactly what we think it is that we need from him. I want to take a break to tell you guys about Bird Dogs. Bird Dogs, we actually got this as part of Locked On. Bird Dogs is a clothing company. They make stretch khaki shorts that are designed to fit slimmer through the thigh and leg, giving you a truly sculpted look. These are a competitor They do the exact same thing as Lululemon, but fit way better. And here's what's cool about them. So we got with, as part of the Locked On Network, they sent us a package saying, hey, try these out, see what you think. And I'm always skeptical of this stuff. Like, all right, we'll see what happened. I got mine in the mail, 2 days ago. Unbelievable fit. Maybe, arguably, my favorite pair of shorts I'm going to have this summer. And here's what I like about them. The fit is good. They fit me nice. They make me look nice. They are so stinking comfortable. The quality of the material is unbelievable. Elastic waistband that's like extremely comfortable. And then just the materials on them are great. Bird Dog fixed the issue by inventing a cloud knit fabric that looks just like khaki but stretches. Hey, there you go. I didn't even read this ad yet to know this is why they're so comfortable. They look like khaki, but they stretch to give you a way slimmer fit without having to sacrifice movement. Bird Dog uses anti-stink sweat wicking fabric that keeps you cool and dry all day long. These are like the shorts of the future, man. I like this. So go to birddogs.com/lockedonnba for a free Yeti style tumbler with your order. That's birddogs.com/lockedonnba for a free Yeti style tumbler. You won't want to take your Bird Dogs off. We promise you that. Unbelievable. Check them out. All right, we'll be back on the other side with talk about Jalen Pickett, who I may be most intrigued by in this draft. We'll do that on the other side. All right, segment 2, Locked On Nuggets podcast. Matt Moore is away for much-deserved vacation. I'm Adam Matas hosting solo today. We just went over Julian Strawther, who is going to be the headliner of the draft this year. The guy that I think is most interesting, and maybe it's in part because he was nowhere on my radar, is Jalen Pickett. And by the way, there were some rumors about the Nuggets taking Jalen Pickett before the draft, some things that I'd seen published about him being a guy. I always thought it was because of the Penn State article, Penn State connection to Calvin Booth. But you know what? Jalen Pickett is a guy that at the end of the day, when I'm just looking at the mock drafts, he was a guy that most mocks had him like late second round. Some people even had him off the board. I think the Ringer had him at number 60. So, like the last pick. But here he goes at 32. And again, if you just look at the mock drafts, it's always funny when people go, oh, that's a reach. That's a reach. When you start to get to 32, if you just go back and look at the draft, the guys that are mocked at or taken at 32 are rarely better than the guys at 40, 42, 52, whatever. Like at that point, I'm not saying it's a crapshoot, but at that point you can kind of throw it out. But I love that the Nuggets made trades to get picks in this draft, and then they take guys that were so later, that were projected to go so much later. It just shows you that one trait of Calvin Booth that I've gotten just in getting to know him and talking to him and him taking over, he's extremely decisive, and I would say extremely convicted. His strong convictions about what he believes in. So the fact that 2 years in a row now, you've taken players that are like, okay, wow, that seems like it's out of left field. He knows what he likes, and he says, that's what I'm going to go and get. Like I said, we only have one player to kind of judge him off of so far, and that's Christian Brown. But he passed with flying colors there, so we'll see with Peyton Watson, and then, of course, a player like Jalen Pickett. So who is Jalen Pickett? 6'2" point guard, 6'7" wingspan. So first of all, we're breaking the mold twice now with what we thought Calvin Booth prioritized over everything else. Number one was defense. Well, you take a guy like Strawther. Okay, not exactly a guy that, even if you're higher on his defense than I am, he's not a stopper. And the Nuggets look like they were adding just great defensive players because as we watched in the finals and the conference finals and even in the second round, you can't have any marks on the floor. They'll find you and what have you. So he breaks that one by going with a shooter who's questionable defense. And then the second one was length. Are we going to have any small players? Now, 6'2" with a 6'7" wingspan isn't necessarily small for a point guard, but it certainly isn't big. And when you watch Jalen Pickett play, he is super strong. He's pretty jacked. He's a mature build. He's already got a man's body. He's almost 24 years old, so he's going to be one of the oldest players in this draft. But he's not long, and you could see that if there is a weakness to his game, it's that there are times when he gets switched on to taller players where he just looks extremely undersized. And, of course, in the NBA, that's going to happen a lot. But why is he interesting? Well, first of all, let's start with the comp. My comp for him is Andre Miller. One of my all-time favorite Nuggets. Andre Miller played at a weird pace, right? Kind of slower, just uses leans and gets you off balance, and then was too strong. I mean, Andre Miller was a really strong guy. He was bigger frame, bigger bodied. But he was just so smart, and he was so good at using his size to his advantage that he, like Jokic, played at his own pace and nobody could speed him up. Jalen Pickett reminds me of that. So Andre Miller, will start there with the comp. I think his number one skill is his brain. When I was texting around asking people, words came up like genius, high basketball IQ, floor general, orchestrates the offense. And when I got into the tape afterwards, because I'll be honest, I didn't watch Jalen Pickett tape before the draft. But as I got home last night and even this morning, and you're trying to like read everything and view some videos, the guy, it's pops how well he sees the floor. So first of all, elite floor general, and that he plays at his own pace, doesn't turn the ball over. You can't really pressure. You put pressure on him, he doesn't mind. He handles the ball, and then he gets into pick and roll. He gets into ISO. He gets into attacking, whatever it is offensively. He runs it really, really smoothly. He is a smooth floor general. But more than that, super high IQ. And here's the thing that I think it almost feels like hyperbole me saying this because I need to watch more of the film. But my first, pass through of the tape and all of the, scouting reports, the guy seems to have every type of pass. And what I mean by that is pick and roll pocket pass, pick and roll over the top pass, around the defense, he's got it, skip pass, and then you think, okay, skip pass going to the hoop, skip pass going to the corner, skip pass going away from the corner. He could throw all of them. In fact, it's really impressive how well he delivers passes across his body. He's really strong. For a 6'2" guy, he has incredible strength. And so that manifests itself in a couple ways, but the ability to throw cross-court passes, offhanded, right on target, he is elite. I think he's going to be the second best passer. Let me think if I really believe this. You got Jokic, of course. Jamal Murray is a really great passer in terms of the way he has more offense to his game. He's bigger, so he has these different things. But if you think in terms of difficulty of pass, I think he is going to be the second best passer on the team. He delivers insane type passes and is a great floor general. And he, like Jokic and like a Chris Paul or these types, he makes passes that you don't see with a bird's eye view of the court. You don't always see where he's going. So he'll kind of hesitate. He'll draw defenders out. Very good at understanding angles. Like he manipulates the defense to say, okay, they're doing this. And you'll watch him and you'll think, what's he doing? Is he trapped? And it's like, no, he's just waiting for the defense to rotate. And then he's making the perfect pass. So an incredibly smart player and a great floor general, very mature, game ready. Like I said, he's almost 24 years old. In a weird way, Pickett might be more ready to play next year than Strawther, in part because if you do lose Bruce, you need a backup point guard. Does Denver go for a veteran there? He might be a guy that is even more game ready than a player like Strawther, just because he can go in and not turn the ball over and run pick and rolls and do some different things. So first and foremost, floor general, I think he looks really, really good. And then second, everybody saw this on the timeline last night. We talked about it on the show. He played a style of basketball at Penn State where he would, get into pick and roll, keep his defender in jail, and then just keep him there the whole time. Like he was very good at holding a defender on his hip and manipulating the defense from there. That's why I say he played really, really slow. They called it booty ball because he's so strong and stocky, and he would kind of stick his ass out and keep the defender on his hip, and then just manipulate the defense from one defender being out of place at all times. They called it booty ball. He hated that nickname, by the way. He was hoping they could come up with a better name. Maybe we can help him out. But it's a very unique style of basketball, a la Chris Paul. Chris Paul does this a lot, where he just plays slow, gets the defense out of position, and then this very patient okay, now let's make a half step, a full step advantage, step and a half, and now we have a dunk or a layup. So I really like his ability to orchestrate an offense and use his physical tools to his advantage. If you talk about the weaknesses, the weakness is that he's 6'2". And now you look at a second unit that already has some defense around him, Christian Brown, maybe Peyton Watson, Zeke, and Vlatko. If we just plug those guys in as the players currently on the roster who could fill in the second unit, well, you're missing a point guard. Now, that lineup has a lot of length and switchability. I think you're going to have to switch. I think your defense is going to have to be switch when he's on the court, because having him fight around screens and then challenge from behind, he's so little that there's just that augments his weaknesses. Now, switching, you're also probably going to have to be doubling the post and double out because he's so little that you're going to have to be helping him there. But with the length that Denver has with their second unit, that might be an option. So I'm very intrigued by him. I think that next year he's likely outside of the top 9, but I think there's a chance that he is a guy that halfway through the year, if Denver say they brought back Ish Smith and said, or Reggie Jackson and said, you're our backup point guard, I do think there's a chance that some injury happens, something happens where he gets a shot and gets 10 games under his belt, and you go, you know what? The defense didn't suffer, and offensively, he's such a better floor general. in terms of moving the ball around and get him, that it might work. So I wouldn't bet on it, but he's a guy that I just would not be surprised if he in short order breaks into a guy that you felt comfortable with being a backup point guard. Likely outside the top 9, but there's a chance. Long term, I do think that he projects to be a backup point guard. If I look at him and Colin Gillespie right now, I think I like Pickett more than Gillespie. Gillespie has the shooting advantage. Jalen Pickett, streaky shooter. He had games where I think he went 5 of 9, 6 of 9, something like that from 3, but he had a lot of games where he went 0 of 3, 0 of 2, 0 of 4, whatever it is. So he's a hot and cold shooter. His shot looks like a guy that's always going to be a 33, 34% three-point shooter. Maybe he improves that. But the shooting edge clearly goes to Colin Gillespie. But I think, and Colin Gillespie is a very good floor general as well, going to be a low mistake guy and what have you. I think Jalen Pickett might have the ability to generate more offense than him. So those two guys may be fighting long-term for the same spot, backup point guard. I might handicap it, though, to Jalen Pickett just because he's my type of player. You guys have heard me talk about Andre Miller for years. I love Andre Miller. He's in that mold, and I just love that type of guy. Super high IQ, and I'm curious to kind of see how he develops. So Jalen Pickett to me was a strange pick, but one that I'm a little bit intrigued by, and we'll see where he goes from there. All right, let's talk about the Game Time app. You guys, summer is here. There's all these concerts going on. Anybody see that flood, by the way, at Red Rocks the other day with the hail and everything? That was insane. Probably not going to be here for too long, although knock on wood, who the heck knows, man? We've had this weather forever. But soon enough, sunny nights are going to be, our sunny days and warm, cool nights are going to be out at Red Rocks. There's going to be concerts there. I believe I'm seeing Hozier later on. And guess where I get the tickets? Right there from the Game Time app. They've got all the great deals. People buying and selling tickets right there on the Game Time app means you always get the best prices. You find tickets to the same section and row for less. Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. That's right. If you find tickets somewhere else that are cheaper than Game Time, they have that guarantee where they will give you credit up to 110% of the difference there. Fastest growing ticket app in the country. Get images of your seats before you buy them. So if you looking at a seat and you're like, man, that's kind of in the corner. Is it behind the basket? What's it look like? They got this little app where you can just click on it and it'll show you what your view should look like from that. Very, very helpful. Buy tickets in a matter of seconds, 2 taps and you're set. And then what I love, you got all those ticketing sites and then it's $100. By the time you check out, it's $10,000. Game Time has the all-in price, so you can just switch it to all-in price, and then you see fees, you see everything, so you don't have to guess what it's going to be at checkout. So download the Game Time app now. Create an account and use Locked On NBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code Locked On NBA for $20 off your first purchase. Download the Game Time app today. Last-minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Also want to tell you guys about Prize Picks. You got the $1 million daily Superflex promotion every day of the NBA. Oh man, the NBA playoffs are already over. We got to update this ad read here. Prize Picks is daily fantasy. What do that's where you go in and you pick 2 to 6 players. Instead of it just being gambling, what are we going to do? You build a roster and you set your roster for that night. You got MLB going on right now. You got PGA going on. So you do have a couple sports even through the summer, but Major League Baseball, you go and set your roster like a fantasy roster. And then you just play against the field. Those projections, what were their projections for that game? Did they do better or worse? It's as simple as that. So download the Prize Pick apps or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code Locked On. If you deposit $100, Prize Picks will give you $100. If you deposit $50, Prize Picks will give you $50. Don't forget to enter promo code Locked On at sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100. All right, we'll be back on the other side with Hunter Tyson. All right, last segment here of the Locked On Nuggets podcast. And one other thing real quick as we're going back, because I saw it in the comments. Jalen Pickett in some ways reminds you of Bruce Brown in that a little bit undersized, although Bruce is 6'4". Let me make this clear. 6'4", Pickett just 6'2". But both of them play bigger than their size. They're very strong. They can get into the paint. They like physicality. And got that dog in them. Both of those guys got that dog in them. So there's a little bit of similarities there. The third pick, and the one I'm most low on, I'm most down on. Now, he was the 37th pick, the latest pick. Denver did use all 3 of their picks. And I'm kind of curious when I talk to Calvin next to kind of hear, okay, what was the idea here? Hunter Tyson is 6'8", He's 23 years old, so another guy that's older, 6'10" wingspan, so not like an enormous wingspan for a guy 6'8". And he's a shooter out of Clemson. 6'8", shot 40.5% on 6 attempts per game, so even better percentage than and on higher or same percentage and a slightly higher volume than Strawther. He is one of those players that got better. As with Strawther, improved as a shooter every year, but Hunter Tyson's last year I think was more of an outlier. Like Strawther was always a good shooter who became an elite one. Hunter Tyson was a guy that grew into a good and then great knockdown 3-point shooter. But as I got into the tape, let's start with the comp. I think Hunter reminds me, this is a funny comp. Offensively, he reminds me of Mike Miller. The way he moves, like his body movements remind me of a Mike Miller. Now I'm doing the thing where I have a white guy with long hair and another white guy with long hair. So that's probably part of why I'm saying this. But, he's clearly an off-ball mover. And like Strawther, I'm going to go ahead and give him the elite label for that. He is an elite off-ball mover. He's going to be a guy that you could plug into Denver's system and he would know exactly how to get to the corners, how to, he sprints. We talked about in training camp how Michael Porter Jr., Michael Malone was frustrated. He's like, get to the corner quick. And sometimes Porter doesn't like to do that. Hunter Tyson's a guy that sprints to the corner every single time. That guy loves to get to the corner because he knows his value is there. 6'8" shooter, get to the corner in transition, and then you compromise the defense. And he also has the ability in a very smooth stroke to get there and get the shot up quickly. When the defense rotates, same thing. He's very good at moving into open pockets, reading the floor spacing. And with a player like Nikola Jokic, he's like Peyton Manning. If everybody does their job the way they're supposed to, meaning if you all read the court properly, the defense rotates like this, I need to go to the wing, or rotates that way, I need to get to the corner, or I need to cut. He's one of those guys that I don't think is going to make mistakes on that very often. So in that way, Jokic will love him. You know the way Jokic loves to throw the pass because he sees the defense. He doesn't even see where the guy is. He just assumes that the defense is here. My guy is supposed to be there. Jokic, they'll throw a no-look pass. Hunter Tyson is a guy that I think is going to fit that mold because he knows the right spot and he always gets to the right spot. So offensively, he's going to check all those boxes. And then as a cutter, he's actually really, really good as a cutter. Gets to the basket, has a great feel for the game, attacks closeout, same thing. He doesn't have like any wiggle to his game. He's not going to be a guy that like breaks guys down. But again, 6'8", you got to close out hard. And if you over close out, he can get to the basket, but with his handle and is comfortable just playing in motion. Catch on the move because the defense has to turn, one dribble, go up. He knows how to do all of that. Offensively, I would call him an A-plus fit with the Denver Nuggets. An A-plus fit because he can shoot, he's long, he's just going to fill a role. The issue with him is defensively, I hope I'm wrong on this one. With Strawther, I said I doubt it. With Hunter Tyson, I really doubt defensively that he's going to be able to hang at the NBA level. Kind of slow-footed. Now, he has length. I mean, if you want to talk about what does he have going for him, he's got length. And he's got rebounding. 9.6 rebounds per game, 16.8 rebound percentage. That's elite. By the way, Strawther, a great rebounder for a guard. He grabs 6 rebounds a game. So you're talking about the two guys that don't have defense. The one thing they have is rebounding. And I do think that is going to be another trait of the Calvin Booth era. He loves rebounders. And I think that's a lot because, and I share this view, by the way, defense is mostly a team concept. How do the guys fit together? Can they execute a scheme? Do they not make mistakes? That's half the battle. Just don't make mistakes, and you're going to force teams into, not tough shots, but lower percentage shots. Just keep them away from the rim, run them off the three-point line, and okay, let's see if they make enough floaters and jumpers to keep up with Denver's high-powered offense. And then if you rebound, then rebounding becomes a premium because if you have enough guys that can do that, the only way you can get beat is if they get offensive rebounds. He's a great defensive rebounder, a very, very, very good defensive rebounder, as is Strawther. So he's got that going for him. But when I watch him and how slow-footed he is, even at the college level, I look at that and I go, if you just project what does he become, how much can you improve that? And then what is his role in a playoff series eventually down the line? Yeah, I just think, man, it's hard to imagine a team being able to hide him, even in a second unit. If there's a Chris Paul for somebody off the second unit, like they're going to find that guy and just cook him every single time. So I love his offensive game. I would say I'm in love with his offensive game, but his defensive game gives me so much pause that I look at him and I go, I just don't know about this guy. I don't know. I'm not going to get too hyped about him. I'm going to have to see him in summer league. I'm going to have to see how he holds up. And then even next year, should he be a two-way guy, a G League guy, whatever it is, I'm just going to have to see a lot more of him before I get too excited about what he could be long-term. So offensively, again, I fell in love with his game last night, watching the highlights and stuff on offense. I was just like, man, this guy out, Yoke's going to love playing with him. The same with Strawther's. But both of those guys, are they going to be defenders? I don't know. If we look at the depth chart, though, now for this team, this is where it kind of gets interesting. Your starting lineup is set: Murray, KCP, MPJ, Gordon, and Jokic. Your second unit right now, let's call Bruce Brown questionable. We're going to find out here in the coming days, if he's coming back or not. Pray to God he is. I love this roster if he comes back. Christian Brown, Peyton Watson. Christian Brown, a lock at the shooting guard now off the bench, and that's an A-plus bench shooting guard, A-plus next year. Got over the rookie hump where he was good this year, obviously good enough, and had moments of greatness. I think next year Christian Brown is going to be a great bench guy for the Denver Nuggets. Just you're over the rookie mistakes. He's only going to get better. He's going to play more and more minutes. I think he's going to be an elite bench player next year, Christian Brown. Peyton Watson's a big question mark. We all want to believe. I hope he's ready for it, because if he is, even if he just has a Christian Brown-esque rookie season next year where he makes plays, he's a utility player, and in the playoffs there's games where he plays 2 minutes and there's games where he plays 15 minutes. That would be a good outcome for Denver. You've got Zeke Naji and Vlatko Čančar at the 4-5. I would love for these guys to pan out because I like both players, and I think that the ability, first of all, I love Vlatko Čančar. I would love for him to be there, and the team needs a little creation. I think he could be a secondary creation, a la a mini Nikola Jokic in some ways. But more importantly, defensively, you switch everything with that lineup, and you've got 6'7" Brown, Peyton Watson at 6'8", Zeke Naji at 6'10", 6'11", Vlatko Čančar at 6'9". That's big, rangy. You've got lots of accumulative length, and they all can switch everything, and I think that's a great defensive lineup. If Bruce Brown is there, boom, you got it. The offense is still hit or miss with that unit, but I think the defense is going to be so elite that I love it. That gives you 10 guys. The only question mark now is Bruce Brown, so if you don't have him, it does change everything. Then you go to the third string, and you say, for me, that's going to be Jalen Pickett ahead of Colin Gillespie. By the way, Colin Gillespie basically going to have his rookie season next year, and he's on a 2-year two-way, so his second year of the two-way starts there. Pickett, we'll see what happens with him, but I think he's going to be regular roster guy. So naturally, that kind of pits him ahead of Colin just in terms of what is the investment level of these two players at the moment. Also, I just like Pickett more. I like Colin. I like both of these guys. I think it's close enough that one of them is going to have to win that win that spot eventually. But if we talk about third stringers, you've got 2 point guards now that I don't think, if Brown comes back, it would be curious to see if the Nuggets pick up another point guard or not. I kind of lean towards not, since they'll have a third and fourth stringer basically in the wings. Maybe you don't feel that you need somebody besides Bruce. You got Strawther as the third stringer who can, let's say there's an injury to, if Bruce comes back to him or Christian or any of the guards, Strawther can fill in for 10 games and you lose a lot defensively, but you gain something, and you actually gain a lot, especially in the regular season where teams are not just hunting mismatches and this or that. Strawther could go in and replace a Christian Brown and be a guy that just elevates now you're an offensive second unit because he is getting shots and he creates so much gravity. And then you have Hunter Tyson as a third stringer. I wouldn't be surprised if he was a two-way guy. I would actually put a Jack White, who again we'll see what Denver does with him, but I love Jack White. And to me, he would even be ahead of him. But if you do all of that, let's say Tyson goes to a two-way and Jack White just gets on a regular minimum contract, that would give, and Brown comes back, that would only give you 2 open roster spots. If Bruce Brown does not come back, that gives you 3 open roster spots by my math. Again, if Jack White is there, that's not a lot. Denver's going to add some veterans. Do they bring back a Jeff Green? Do they bring back a Reggie or an Ish or even a Thomas Bryant or DeAndre Jordan? Do they bring back any of those guys just to say, hey, we're keeping some continuity here? These guys were good in limited roles. I don't know, but there's just not a lot of roster spots for Denver in free agency to go out and do that. And they could even leave a roster spot open, maybe for later they see a player that they're like, let's get into the season and see if we don't know exactly. Are we going to need another guard? Do we need a point guard? Maybe you leave a roster spot open. I say all that to say that Denver has a lot of question marks once you get past their top 6 guys, starters and Christian Brown. Bruce comes back, that gives you 7. You're off to a good start. Peyton, we just don't know. Can he play real minutes on a team trying to win 57, 58 games next year and get a top 2 seed in the conference? We don't know that. Zeke Naji has never made it through an entire season. And is he the answer? He's had stretches where he looks great and the Nuggets look great with him, and he's had stretches where he doesn't look great. So Zeke Naji and Vlatko Čančar, that's a question mark. The rest of the guys are all young and have 0 experience. So the temptation to bring in a couple veterans to really, solidify this roster is going to be very strong. But at the same time, if you do bring back a Jeff Green, does he play over Zeke Naji or Vlatko Čančar? Let's just say Jeff Green, who would be a veteran minimum type. Does that take away from what the long-term vision is? I think with Michael Malone winning an NBA championship, his role in this ecosystem on the team is solid. He is here for a while, and rightfully so. He earned it. That was an incredible coaching performance from him, not just last year, but over the last 8 years, but in particular in the playoffs to get Denver to a 16-4 record and win an NBA championship. He is unassailable for the time being. So now, as a guy like Calvin Booth, you probably have to look at this roster and say, okay, in years past, I can give him the veterans and, he played so-and-so over Christian or Peyton or Zeke or Vlatko, and maybe you really wanted to develop these guys. Calvin Booth has to look at this roster now and say, I hope we get Bruce Brown back. But either way, do I bring back Jeff Green and risk him playing over Peyton Watson, over Zeke Naji, over Vlatko Čančar, and we now end up with 8 young players on the roster, none of whom play, and we win another year without developing guys? Or do I risk going into the season without the vets on the roster, and maybe you get off to a slow start, and Peyton Watson is struggling because teams aren't guarding him, and Zeke Naji's shot didn't come back, and Vlatko Čančar's up and down? That's a real challenge for Calvin Booth now as you go into this final stretch. So I think that is going to be something that's interesting to watch over the next week is, does Calvin Booth give Michael Malone a lot of vets? And if so, how does that change how we project this upcoming year for all of these other players? I think that's going to be interesting. Somebody asked, where's the Jack White agenda pushers? I love Jack White. I'm very big on him, not just because he came on the DNVR Nugget show a couple times. I just like guys that stay in their lane. He rebounds at a high level. He defends, I think, at a high level. He hustles. He's smart. And then if the shooting is real, he's a great player. He's a guy you could project long-term to be like, hey, man, that's a guy that can be in a top 9 of a playoff team. So Jordan says Adam is more optimistic about Jack White than I think anyone else. Again, I love guys that have an understanding of who and what they are, and they can do those things. Now, like everybody else, Jack White, like Peyton, to me, Jack White is similar to that. Peyton Watson has more of an upside, but it's similar in that I can say I like a skill set while admitting that there's only like 40 minutes of tape on Jack White, right? We have G League tape, which I kind of put to one side. We have Summer League tape, which I almost value even more in some ways. And then we have the NBA tape, of which there's very, very little. I just look at skill set and say, what's the skill set? Is there something there? And I look at it and I go, he rebounds like a monster. He has great positional versatility. He puts his body on the line. We saw him block shots and get dunked on. You love that from your role players. And then the three-point shooting, again, he was the best practice three-point shooter on the Nuggets this year. I don't think he's that good, but if he's a guy that's a reliable catch-and-shoot three-point shooter, 3-and-D, perfect. I absolutely love it. So Jack White could be a guy that, the Nuggets, take a look at next year and say, hey, we'll make him our 10th guy or what have you. It's an interesting draft. Not players that I don't think it's a slam dunk draft. I'm going to be very curious to see what happens with these guys. That's a possibility that none of these guys work out. And you look at it and you go, that's 3 spots in a whole year of 3 guys, and none of them really panned out to anything. I think that's on the table. But Calvin Booth, like I said, very convicted in the guys that he takes. Won offense this year, which I think is interesting. And even though there were some reaches, in terms of where they were mocked, I'm very curious to see. I will say this. It'll be a good summer league team. You're likely going to have Colin and Pickett. You're going to have Strawther. You'll probably have Peyton Watson. You might bring back a guy like Jack White. You might get a guy like Hunter Tyson playing. So you're already going to have more than a starting lineup of guys that are just like roster guys, either two-way or regular roster guys already on your team. So I think it'll be some years you go and you only have one real player, and then you got a bunch of guys. You're like, I don't know. This year you might have 5, 6, maybe even 7 guys that you go, these could all be two-way / roster guys on next year's team. So I'm interested for that. It should make for a very good summer league. Everybody, thanks so much for tuning in and hanging out with me tonight. Going to take the weekend off. Much needed weekend for everybody to take a rest. But we will be back Sunday night, me and Matt Moore, and we'll get his perspective on all of this as well. Have a great weekend, everybody.